Well, Australia's superannuation net pot is now close to $3.5 trillion and growing fast, fuelled by Australia's rapid population increase and low unemployment rates. The problem, as it always was known, is that the largest rump of the population aged today between 44 and 60, the so-called Gen Xers and some of the baby boomers, are now in their pre-retirement years. The question government's grappling with through a series of inquiries is how to manage the transition. More pension-style annuities, maybe? How is the family home treated? Caps on tax benefits in super. The oldest retirement savings organisation in Australia is the AMP. Though it's changed radically in recent years, its voice is still important. Its chief executive is Alexis George, and I caught up with her this week.
Well, I think we are the best in the world, actually, when it comes to compulsion in terms of saving and preparing people, and we've been in that for a number of years now. I think why it is time to have a good look is that many baby boomers are moving into the next phase of their retirement, which is actually they start to draw down from the system. And this is the first time we've seen a big wave moving through that to draw down. So I think it's natural for us to have a look at it right now. System's mature, it's a big system, it's envied by many places around the world, but looking at the next phase is important.
Okay, so as baby boomers and Gen Xers come out of the system in the next 15 years, let's say, when they stop work, there's enormous amounts of money that come out of the system. So my question is whether that is a worrying time for them or a worrying time for fund managers and superannuation funds that hold that money right now.
Well, I think we should start with the person who's retiring, right? And I think all the work we've done would suggest it's a really worrying time for them because, you know, you look, many of us sit here and they look at our parents, they're living longer and longer and longer. So you're going into retirement. We don't quite know, are we going to be well? Are we going to be sick? You know, what age are we going to die at? How do I look after my kids? So I think human psyche says if I'm worried, if I'm nervous, let's bunker down.
Okay, yeah, because if you've got some of the best actuaries in the country, if they could tell me exactly what day I'm going to die, I can plan myself out to that day. But if you don't tell me that and I live way beyond that, guess what? I'm going to be naturally quite defensive to make sure that my money lasts long enough.
And that's exactly what we see, right? We see people go into retirement and with quite nice balances now. They don't have any certainty about the future. The system is quite complex, let's be honest, because
it's nuts. I mean, well, as you point out, there's the problems of trying to work out your pension, then trying to work out your superannuation, then trying to work out healthcare benefits. Yeah. Where does your home fit into this? How do you actually work out whether you can actually give money to your kids or not? It's super duper complex, and there's not enough advisors in Australia.
There's not enough availability of advice. So you see people going through all of that, and what you said is exactly right, and you go, well, that actually looks scary. That looks scary to me. So I'm probably going to conserve and spend as little as I need to in those first years. And you see it in the stats. People take the minimum amount of account-based pension and then typically die with quite large monies. And so I think it does require a bit of a rethink about maybe how do we give people confidence that they're going to have a base standard of living. So look at retirement income solutions. So maybe they can feel able and confident to spend a bit more in those active years and have the retirement that they should have, not give it to the kids to have the retirement that they should have had.
Righto, but I want to take you back to a little something. The Treasurer has said effectively that too many Australians are using superannuation as an intergenerational wealth transfer means. Now, to me, I get worried about that. And the reason I worry about that is because I wonder whether there's some compulsion coming, that when I stop work, that the government at some point forces me into one of your account-based pensions, an allocated annuity, an allocated pension. In other words, my super automatically goes there and I start getting a paycheck on a monthly basis or whatever. Now, the problem is, what happens if my gutters go? What happens if my house needs restumping? What happens if I need a new car? People are going to be very worried and concerned about that too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think this intergenerational wealth transfer, I mean, it's real, let's be honest about that. I'm not sure it's always conscious for the reasons we've just talked about. I personally, we as a group, don't support compulsion. I think everyone's in a different position when it comes to that point where they're no longer earning an income. You know, some people could still have mortgages. We all know that owning your own home gives you a sense of security, so maybe it's best to pay off your mortgage in that scenario. So I think having a true compulsion doesn't work for most of the
Okay, but we've had compulsion in the accumulation phase, which is going out to 12%, which is great.
Yeah.
But then why not have compulsion for some portion of your super so that you make certain a person doesn't go and spend a lot and then end up on the age pension? That's what the government's worried about.
Yeah, firstly, I don't think most people do that. We've just talked about the fact that actually most people hold it. Secondly, their situations are very different at retirement. You're forcing people to save, essentially, in the accumulation phase. Now you're saying you've done all that saving, what do you want to do with your money? So I'm not sure compulsion's there. But I think what you said before is really key as well. The issue is, today, the system is confusing, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's interplay with the pension system, multiple means tests depending on whether you go into aged care or you want to get a pension. It's hard for me as an executive in the job to understand that. A normal person out there doing their day-to-day, impossible. So we do have to get more advice in those people's hands. Of course, full financial advice is the best solution, but it can't only...
But that's really expensive, right?
Well, it costs money, so I don't think that's the only solution. And we do have to be able to, as super funds, give people basic advice, help them with basic queries. So I think that's important to continue down that front.
Is one answer here potentially that the government, as part of these reviews, does a root and branch change in the way that transition to retirement occurs, that you allow a person to work as long as they possibly can and continue to accumulate superannuation, that you actually then give them some clarity about how much health care they will or won't get, how much they're... So in other words, simplifying the system, so maybe you don't need as much advice towards the end, that the system actually helps you through it.
I certainly think there's a lot of opportunity for simplifying the system, right? Even in the accumulation phase, we've got annual limits on contributions, we've got caps at one point, we've got a lot of legislative change, so people are not sure, is that going to be the same when I get there or less when I get there?
They're worried about that change. Yeah. So people become conservative because they're just waiting for the government to come and whack them over the head and try and either collect some more tax or make them do something that they otherwise wouldn't want to do. That's also, that legislative risk is part of this problem too.
Well, I think there is an opportunity to simplify the legislation, and I think there's an opportunity for us to be able to look at giving advice in a more simpler way for those who don't want to spend the money on a full financial plan. So I think those things are absolutely sure, because what you said before is true. If people are unsure, they become more conservative, and therefore they don't spend as much in the retirement, and therefore in those active years they probably don't have as much fun as they could have.
Yeah.
So I think that's a combination of advice, simplification, and I'm not talking advice. Advice can take many forms, simplification and then certainty.
Okay, then I want to take you back to that question I asked you before about the individual superannuation funds, because as baby boomers and Gen Xers transition out or transition to account-based pensions, then that creates risk for those funds themselves if they have to change their asset allocation or if they get large amounts of money coming out. So that again is something about the stability of the whole system.
Yeah, of course there's going to be more money coming out. I mean, I think we're in a unique situation in Australia with immigration. Our population does continue to grow. So yes, there'll be some decrease in the system, but it's not to the extent that many other countries are experiencing. So I wouldn't say, and I certainly talk for us, that's not what we're thinking about. We're thinking about actually how can we help these people, because it's damn confusing, and how do we help them have a better retirement. But, you know, depending on demographics, that could be an issue.
And tell me about the government and its plan to basically centre control of superannuation in the accumulation phase especially around those key funds that are large enough to bring their costs down and large enough to get out performance. And those who don't literally wither on the vine in terms of taking in new money.
Yeah, well, I think, performance is ultimately important for savings, whether it's interest or whether it's performance when you're in your super fund. So performance is important. And I think there has been a radical change in the way funds think about that. Fees are obviously important, but they're not the only thing. And I think the services that we can offer as super funds are important. So I don't think it's only about scale, but certainly being bigger allows you to be able to provide those advice services, make sure that you've got different funds for different occasions, make sure you're efficient, keep up with the digital experience. But scale isn't the only thing.
Alexis George, lovely to chat to you. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Ross.